can't wait to marry you! Aw, that's really sweet, babe. I can't wait to marry you either. I'm just so excited! I can't believe it's finally happening. After all the things that happened. For a while there, I thought our wedding was never gonna push through. Wait, what? That's news to me. What happened? What made you think our wedding wasn't gonna happen? Rose looked down, ashamed. She never really told me what had been weighing on her mind lately. She always seemed so stressed. I'd assumed it was just the upcoming wedding. But that night, my fiancé told me the truth. The truth about her opportunistic gold-digging family. She told me how Betty and her mom had always been so jealous the moment they learned that she was with me. 'Cause, you're our city's most respected, most successful businessman. For a long time, my sister and mother had been looking for the same. It was their dream to marry a hot, rich, perfect guy like you. Only their reasons were a bit more nefarious. They just wanted to get rich. They wanted the high life without having to work for it. They told me as much every day. When I brought you home and introduced you to my mother and sister, they only saw dollar signs. They didn't care that we were in love. All they had in their hearts was greed and jealousy. They've always wanted you for themselves. Several times, Betty and Mom came up with various schemes to get me to break up with you. They even hatched a plan to get you alone while Mother trapped me in a gas station bathroom. But none of their plans saw any success. You mean that was when you went missing for hours during our anniversary? That was them? Yeah, and now that we're so close to the finish line, I don't know, Adam. I'm just even more scared now of what they might do. I chuckled. There was no way anyone would be able to touch her while I was around. I kissed Rose on the forehead and hugged her tight. Don't you worry. I won't let anything happen to you. Even if I have to disinvite them to the whole thing, I'll make sure nothing goes wrong. Hi everyone, my name's Adam. This is the story of how I ended up having 3 wives. Do you have a unique title idea? Comment it down below and like the ones you think are interesting. You never know. Your story may be the next one we post. Alright, now back to the story. I smiled at my soon-to-be wife as she came down the aisle. The choir was singing. People's eyes were misting with happy tears, and the white doves were romantically cooing from above us. I couldn't contain my happiness. I was finally gonna marry the love of my life. I was so happy that I didn't even notice how Rose had been extremely quiet the whole time. I couldn't tell what she was thinking either, as she wore a thick veil the whole time. But the moment everyone was waiting for finally came. We said our vows, and I lifted the fabric to finally kiss my wife. And I almost fell back in shock. I said I do to someone else. It was Betty. What have you done? Where's Rose? Why, look for her. Shouldn't we be on our way to our honeymoon? Husband? I shook her violently. My eyes were bulging with uncomfortable fury. What have you done to her? Where's my wife? You're looking right at her, sweetheart. Now, come on. I want to go on that safari. It was clear I wasn't going to get any answers from her. So I pushed Betty away and began searching the crowd. Rose! Rose! Where are you? Everyone was just as shocked as I was. Commotion was beginning to break and people were standing up to look for Rose. Just then, somebody screamed and pointed at the sky. Smoke. And it was coming from the cottage where Rose was getting ready for our wedding. I ran faster than I ever run in my life, wishing and hoping against hope that wherever the smoke is coming from, it was not Rose's room. But I fell to the ground the moment I realized all that wishing was for nothing. I saw the glasses on the cottage burst from the heat of the fire. I heard a familiar scream. I ran and rammed the door with my shoulder. I don't even remember what happened next, or how. But all I remember was that I somehow got Rose out of there. I began giving her chest compressions. I breathed into her lips, hoping it wasn't too late. It took a whole minute. A minute that seemed to last ages. But finally, Rose coughed and her eyes flew open. I kissed her and I held her tight. I couldn't begin to explain the fear I felt when I thought I was about to lose her. Rose and I cut off all ties with Betty and their mom. I could never forgive them, but I didn't bother pressing charges. After all, they were still Rose's family. We put all that drama behind us, and Rose and I finally decided to marry again. And this time, nobody else will know about it. Rose didn't bother with a veil. Only our closest friends and my family were invited. It was a small, secret ceremony, and everyone was happy. And most happy of all, of course, were Rose and I. On our wedding night, I woke up panting from a nightmare where Betty was chasing me. I looked at the bedside clock and noticed it was 3 a.m. But then I was paralyzed in fear. Right above me was a silhouette of a woman, and it wasn't my wife. She was grinning so maniacally, and she put her finger on my lips. Not that I was able to make any sound. I found that I couldn't move my mouth, and then I realized why. On my arm was the familiar sensation of a needle. As soon as I realized what was happening, everything went dark. I woke up to organ music and a pair of lips kissing mine. I was still too weak, but I managed to push off whoever it was. I could see Betty jumping up and down from joy. And from beside me, I heard the words, "I now pronounce you man and wife." No, it can't be. I was standing next to Moira, Betty and Rose's mom, and she was wearing white. She had some plastic flowers arranged in a bouquet, and I could see we were in Vegas. All that trouble just to marry me. Immediately after the ceremony, I saw Moira hand a big wad of hundreds to the guy who was officiating the sham wedding. My world came crashing down. How could I have let this all happen? I pushed Moira away. I tried to punch the Elvis impersonator who officiated the wedding, in the hopes of taking the papers away from him. But my knees were still weak from whatever drug Moira and Betty gave me. Luckily, I had a friend who worked at the Strip. I stumbled all the way to his shop and asked for his help. There was no way I was going to let those two have their way. Not when my wife was probably out of her mind, wondering where I was. I called up my lawyers. I had them transfer all that I owed into Rose's name. If she owned everything, those two scheming witches had no claim to any of the money. My plan worked. As soon as I got home, I learned that Rose, too, was drugged by her sister. And together, we resolved to get our vengeance. I sued both Betty and Moira. It was a long and painful process. A lot of people laughed at how I ended up having 3 wives. I nearly lost the respect of the business community. But I poured as much money as I could into gathering all the evidence that would help my case. I reached out to every single person and every single man that Betty and Moira had scammed before. And with Rose's testimony against her own sister and mother, the judge was finally swayed to our camp. It would have been more of an uphill battle if Betty wasn't too cocky and didn't volunteer to take the stand. At first, she had a strong case. She was, after all, the first one I married. And legally, she was my real wife. My wedding to Rose and Moira would be considered bigamous because I was never divorced from Betty before I married them. For a while there, it was looking like I was the one who was gonna get sent to jail. But then, good old, overly confident Betty slipped up. She let slip how it was her and Moira's plan to entrap me, and before long, nobody could stop her from spilling all the beans. She even detailed how Moira had the brilliant idea to drug both Rose and I so they could kidnap me. And that really was a moment I would never forget in my life. To see a criminal so proud of her crime that she willingly admitted it in front of a judge. It was too late for her when she realized what she had done. The judge, the lawyers, and everybody in that courtroom had heard what she said. The trial ended pretty swiftly after that. The judge ruled that my first and third marriages were achieved due to fraudulent means, and she sentenced Moira and Betty to 20 years in prison for everything they did, including the 2 attempts at Rose's life. Rose and I were finally free. To celebrate, we did our wedding all over again. This time, with all the fanfare and all the lavish celebrations we deserved after going through all that. And I gotta tell you, all that suffering and all the nightmarish days before only made our kiss and our wedding day sweeter. I carried my new wife to our white wedding Cadillac and we drove off, living happily ever after.